She's the one who didn't finish college, my father said, his champagne glass raised, 43 guests watching, at his own 60th birthday party. He said it the way you'd introduce a weather forecast, casually, like it was just a fact everyone already knew. I stood there in a fitted black blazer, my hands steady, my smile rehearsed. What he didn't know, what nobody in that room knew, was that the business card in my pocket would hit harder than any speech I could give, and within 60 seconds, his champagne glass would be in pieces on the marble floor. But I need to back up. Because the moment that broke everything didn't start at that party. It started 5 years earlier in a dorm room with a phone call that changed my life. Before I go on, if this story resonates with you, please take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if you genuinely connect with what you hear. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'd love to know. My name is Tori, I'm 28. And this is the story of how I handed my father the truth he spent 5 years trying to bury. Now let me take you back, 5 years, to the night I told my dad I was dropping out of college. It was October. I was 22, a junior. I'd started college a year late after working to save tuition money. That detail matters because Gerald never let me forget it. I was sitting cross-legged on my dorm bed in Austin, laptop open to a spreadsheet I'd been building for 3 weeks. Revenue projections, customer acquisition costs, conversion funnels. Words I'd learned not in a classroom, but behind the counter of a restaurant where I bussed tables and watched the owner lose money every single night because his reservation system was a spiral notebook and a prayer. I'd found something, a gap in the market so wide I could drive a truck through it. Small restaurants, the ones with 12 tables and a handwritten menu, had no affordable software to manage bookings. The big platforms ignored them. I didn't. I picked up my phone and called my father. Gerald Warden, retired senior accountant, a man who measured the world in degrees, titles, and decimal points. I told him everything. The idea. The prototype I'd already started coding at night. The 3 restaurant owners who said they'd pay for it tomorrow if it existed. He let me finish. That was the cruelest part. The silence that made me think he was actually listening. Then he spoke. So you're quitting? Not a question. A verdict. Dad, I'm not quitting. Your brother would never do this. Kyle was 22, still in school, still checking every box Gerald had drawn for him. Of course, Kyle would never do this. Dad, if you'd just look at the numbers. The line went dead. No goodbye. No, let me think about it. No, I love you, but I'm worried. Just the flat silence of a disconnected call. I sat on that bed for a long time, phone in my lap, screen dark. I wasn't crying because I was scared. I was crying because I already knew. That click wasn't just the end of a phone call. It was the end of the version of my father who might have listened. I didn't know yet that the next version would be so much worse. 3 weeks later, I called my grandmother on her birthday. Nana Ruth, 81 years old, sharp as a tack, the kind of woman who remembers every grandchild's shoe size. Tori, sweetheart. Her voice was warm. Then it shifted. Careful. Your father told me you're working at a diner somewhere, waiting tables. Honey, are you eating enough? My stomach dropped. Nana, that's not exactly... He said you quit school because you just couldn't handle it, not because you were sick or anything. He wants us all to pray for you. Pray for me, like I was in hospice. I called Gerald that night. He picked up on the first ring, almost like he was expecting it. Why did you tell Nana I'm a waitress? I told her the truth. You dropped out. You wait tables. His voice was smooth, reasonable. That is what happened, Tori. I'm building a company, Dad. He laughed. Not loud. Just a soft exhale through his nose, the kind of laugh designed to make you feel 6 inches tall. Sweetheart, everyone with a laptop thinks they're an entrepreneur. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles ached. Then I found out the rest. My friend Kelsey from freshman year texted me a screenshot. A voicemail Gerald had left her. He said I was going through a rough time and suggested she give me space. My roommate Jess got a similar call. So did Tanya from my study group. 3 calls. 3 of my closest friends. 2 of them stopped texting me within a month. Gerald wasn't just disappointed. He was building a narrative, calling the right people at the right time with the right tone. Concerned father, heartbroken, just looking out for his little girl. He was erasing me, methodically, and I was only beginning to understand why. 1 year after dropping out, my life looked like this. A 400-square-foot studio apartment in East Austin with a window that didn't close all the way. A desk made from a door balanced on 2 filing cabinets. A coffee maker that only worked if you hit it twice on the left side. I coded 16 hours a day. I waited tables 5 nights a week at a Tex-Mex place on South Congress. I ate ramen so often the sodium made my fingers swell. The product was called Slate, a booking and table management platform for independent restaurants. Nothing flashy, no AI, no blockchain buzzwords. Just a clean, simple system that let a 12-table Italian place stop losing reservations written on napkins. My first 3 customers were all restaurants I'd worked at. They trusted me because I'd carried their plates and memorized their regulars' names. They paid $49 a month each, $147 in monthly recurring revenue. I remember staring at that number on my dashboard and thinking, this is real. Gerald called on Thanksgiving. I almost didn't pick up. Your cousin Jacob just got promoted to VP, he said. No hello. No how are you? 26 years old, same age as you. I said nothing. I'm not trying to make you feel bad, Tori. I'm trying to motivate you. I pressed my thumbnail into my palm until it left a white crescent. Thanks, Dad. Come home for Christmas. We can talk about getting you back into school. I know a few people at UConn who could. I have to go. I hung up first. It was the first time I'd ever hung up on Gerald Warden. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. Something had shifted. Something small and hard had lodged itself behind my ribs, and it was already beginning to grow. Gerald thought that call would push me back to campus. He was wrong. It pushed me further into the only thing I had left, the work. I flew home for Christmas anyway. I don't know why. Maybe I thought showing up would prove something. Maybe I still believed that if I just stood in the same room as my father, he'd eventually see me. Mom opened the door. Brenda Warden, 56, soft-spoken, the kind of woman who communicates love through casseroles and avoids conflict like it's a house fire. She hugged me a beat too long. Her eyes wouldn't meet mine. The living room was full. 15 people. Aunts, uncles, cousins. Gerald stood by the fireplace in a pressed blue shirt, holding court with a glass of bourbon. He saw me, didn't stand, didn't walk over, just raised his glass an inch. Well, look who made it. A cousin asked what I was up to these days. Gerald answered before I could open my mouth. She's figuring things out, aren't you, sweetheart? That voice, dripping with pity. The whole room gave me the look. The one you give a stray dog that wandered in from the rain. I tried. Actually, I'm building a... Kyle, tell everyone about the Anderson account. Gerald pivoted to my brother without blinking, like I'd never spoken at all. After dinner, he found me in the kitchen, alone, loading the dishwasher. He leaned against the counter and spoke quietly, almost gently. Don't embarrass me in front of everyone with your little business. When you have something real, we'll talk. I didn't answer. I finished the dishes. I grabbed my coat. I was halfway to the car when Mom caught up. She pressed a tin of her sugar cookies into my hands. She didn't say a word. She just pulled me close, held on for 5 seconds, and walked back inside. I drove to the airport at 8 p.m. on Christmas night. The cookies lasted 3 days. The silence from my mother, that lasted much longer. And it cut in places Gerald's words couldn't reach. Year 2. Slate had 50 restaurants on the platform. I hired my first 2 employees, a junior developer named Marco and a customer support rep named Sienna, who worked from her kitchen table in Waco. We were scrappy. We were growing. But back in Connecticut, Gerald was growing something too. He'd upgraded the story. I wasn't just waiting tables anymore. Now I was unstable. Now I was not doing well. He told the family in the voice he'd perfected. Low, heavy with concern, the voice of a father carrying a burden no one else could understand. "I worry about her," he'd say. "I don't think she's okay." The effects were surgical. My cousin Dana stopped inviting me to her annual 4th of July cookout. Aunt Pam sent me a prayer chain email. Nana Ruth called less and less. And when she did, she spoke to me like I was made of glass. Kyle phoned one night, cautious. "Dad told me you don't want to talk to anyone, that you asked for space." I nearly dropped my coffee. "Kyle, I never said that. He's the one who— I know. I didn't know what to believe." Gerald had flipped it. He wasn't pushing me out. According to his story, I was pulling away. I was the one isolating myself. He was just the worried father, helpless at the margins. I made one last attempt. I called him. "Dad, I need you to stop telling people things that aren't true about me." "Everything I said is true." His voice was calm, practiced. "You dropped out. You wait tables. What part is wrong?" Technically, parts were true. I had dropped out. I had waited tables. But he was using half-truths the way a locksmith uses picks, carefully, precisely, to open doors that should have stayed shut. I hung up. And I made a decision that would hold for the next 3 years. I would stop explaining. I would let the results speak. And if Gerald never heard them, that was his choice. I didn't know yet that he would hear them, in the worst possible way, on the best possible night. Year 3 is when he crossed the line from words into action. Slate was growing fast. 120 restaurants. Real revenue. I was negotiating our first major contract, a regional chain called Reynolds Hospitality Group. 14 locations across Texas and Oklahoma. If we landed it, the deal would be worth $80,000 annually and put us on the map. Their due diligence was standard: background checks, reference calls, a Google search on Tory Warden. The email arrived on a Tuesday at 9:47 a.m. I still remember the exact time because I was holding a coffee that went cold in my hand while I read it. "Ms. Warden, we spoke with a family member who raised concerns about your personal stability and professional reliability. After careful consideration, we've decided to pursue a different vendor." My chest tightened. I knew. Gerald still had his old accounting network, people who knew people in every industry across the Northeast. And I'd made one mistake. I'd mentioned the name Reynolds to Kyle on the phone 2 months earlier, casual, excited, before I remembered the rule I'd set for myself. Kyle must have mentioned it at Sunday dinner. It only took Gerald one name and 48 hours on LinkedIn. I called Gerald. He picked up on the second ring. "Did you call Reynolds Corp?" "I was looking out for you. You cost me a contract. If your business can't survive one phone call, it wasn't real. That's not your decision to make." A pause. Then his voice, harder now, the mask slipping. "I'm your father. Everything about you is my decision." I ended the call. My hands were trembling, but I didn't throw the phone. I didn't scream. I set it face down on my desk, opened my laptop, and started an email to 4 other potential clients. $80,000. Gone because Gerald Warden found a LinkedIn profile and made a phone call. Not out of love, not out of concern, out of control. Pure, cold, architectural control. He'd moved from gossip to sabotage, from dinner table whispers to destroying my livelihood. And something inside me, the thing that had lodged behind my ribs 2 years ago, locked into place like a deadbolt. I was done defending, done explaining, done bleeding for a man who kept sharpening the knife. From this point on, Gerald would get nothing. No updates, no arguments, no chances, just silence. Until silence wasn't enough anymore. Losing Reynolds nearly broke Slate. I had to let Sienna go. I couldn't look her in the eye when I told her. She said, "I understand, Tori," and that was worse than if she'd yelled. I sold my car, a 10-year-old Civic that barely passed inspection, for $3,000. I took the bus. I slept on the couch in our shared office space because my lease was up and I couldn't sign a new one. That was the month I started therapy. I found Dr. Nguyen through a sliding scale directory. She had a small office near campus with a crooked fern on her windowsill and a box of tissues that never seemed to run out. In our third session, she asked the question I'd been avoiding. Why don't you just tell your family the truth? Because he'll find a way to make it small. He always does. She tilted her head. And if he does? Then I'll have given him another weapon. Dr. Nguyen leaned forward. Tori, you don't need him to believe you. You need you to believe you. I stared at the crooked fern. I'd been watering someone else's opinion of me for 3 years and wondering why I felt so dry. That night I made 2 decisions. First, no one in the Warden family would receive any information about Slate, my finances, or my professional life. Gerald couldn't destroy what he couldn't see. Second, I would build this company so quietly and so well that when the truth finally surfaced, and truth always surfaces, no speech would be necessary. On Friday, I opened my inbox to a message I'd almost missed between spam. Subject line, interested in Slate, can we talk? Sender, Patricia Voss, former CTO of a publicly traded restaurant tech company. Angel investor. The kind of name you Google and then sit very still for a minute. I sat very still for a minute. Then I replied. Patricia Voss was 53, silver-haired, direct, and terrifying in the best possible way. She'd built and sold 2 companies before I was old enough to drive. She took the meeting at a coffee shop in downtown Austin. No office, no assistant, just a black Americano and a legal pad. I pitched for 20 minutes. She asked questions for 40, not softball questions, hard ones. What's your churn rate? How do you handle restaurants that cancel after onboarding? What happens when Toast or OpenTable builds the same feature? I answered everyone. Not perfectly, but honestly. And when I didn't know something, I said, I don't know yet. Here's how I'd find out. She put her pen down. I like that you don't pretend. Most founders fake it until they forget what's real. 2 weeks later, Patricia Voss invested $200,000 for 15% of Slate Systems. She also became my mentor, the first person in my professional life who looked at what I was building and said, this matters. That evening, I sat in my studio apartment, still the same 400 square feet, still the same broken window, and held my phone. I scrolled to Mom. I wanted to tell her, God, I wanted to tell her. But I knew the math. Anything Brenda Warden heard at dinner, Gerald Warden heard by dessert. I put the phone down. Instead, I called Uncle Ray. Ray Warden, my father's younger brother, 53, quiet, lived in Portland, sold handmade furniture. Never once asked me when I was going back to school. I told him everything, the company, Patricia, the revenue, the plan. He listened without interrupting. A Warden family trait, apparently, just deployed differently. When I finished, the line was quiet for a moment. Then, I always knew you'd figure it out, kid. Don't let anyone make you small. I cried. For the first time in 2 years, I cried because something good was happening and someone who shared my last name actually noticed. Year 4 is when the irony got so thick I could choke on it. Slate Systems had 500 restaurants on the platform, 20 employees, $3 million in annual revenue. We'd moved into a real office, glass walls, standing desks, a kitchen that actually had food in the refrigerator. Forbes ran a feature in their digital edition, a roundup of emerging restaurant tech founders. Slate was highlighted. My name was in the article. Slate was featured. My name was in the article. But I'd specifically asked the journalist not to include my photograph. She thought it was modesty. It wasn't. It was strategy. Uncle Ray called the day after Thanksgiving. You're never going to believe this. Try me. Your father spent 20 minutes at the dinner table raving about some brilliant tech company that's transforming the restaurant industry. He read about it in Forbes. He was practically pounding the table. I closed my eyes. He said, and I'm quoting, "This is the kind of thing I wish Tori had the brains to build." The silence between us stretched for 5 full seconds. I almost choked on my turkey, Ray said. I laughed. It came out short and sharp like a cough. There was no humor in it. My father was praising my work at the same table where he pitied my failure. Same meal, same breath. Don't tell him, Uncle Ray, not yet. I won't, he paused. But someday, Tori, he's going to find out, and when he does, I want a front row seat. I hung up and sat with it. Gerald Warden, the man who told 40 relatives his daughter was a struggling waitress, was now a fan of her company. He just didn't know the waitress and the CEO were the same person. That Thanksgiving, he carved a turkey and my reputation in the same room. He celebrated Slate and mourned Tori without realizing they were the same story. I saved Uncle Ray's voicemail. I had a feeling I'd want to hear it again someday. Kyle got engaged in February. I found out through Instagram. A photo of him and Jessica, beaming, a ring catching the light, captioned, "She said yes," on a story I almost swiped past. He hadn't told me. Or rather, Gerald hadn't let him. Kyle called 2 days later. His voice was tight with guilt. "Dad said you were too busy to come to the engagement party. I should have called you myself. I'm really sorry, Tori." "It's okay, Kyle. Congratulations. I mean it." It wasn't okay, but Kyle wasn't the enemy, and I wasn't going to make him feel worse than he already did. The party had already happened. 30 guests at the house in Westport. Gerald's full production, caterer, champagne, a toast that apparently made Jessica's mother cry. I heard the details from Dana, my cousin, the one who'd stopped inviting me to her cookouts, until she didn't. She called that night, hesitant. "I need to tell you something." I sat down. "Your dad told everyone at the party that you're still waitressing somewhere in Texas, that he's given up hope." She paused. I heard her swallow. Then he pulled Jessica's parents aside, like he was confiding in them, and told them you dropped out because of emotional problems. I didn't move. He said it so quietly, Tori, so sincere, like it was breaking his heart to admit it, but it felt calculated. "Thank you for telling me, Dana." "Are you okay?" No, I was not okay. My father had just told my brother's future in-laws, people I'd never met, that I was mentally ill. He'd poisoned a well I hadn't even arrived at yet, but I kept my voice level. "I will be." I hung up, walked to my bathroom mirror, and looked at myself for a long time. The woman staring back at me ran a company worth 8 figures. She employed 20 people. She'd been featured in Forbes, and her own father was introducing her as a cautionary tale to strangers at family parties she wasn't invited to. Something crystallized in that mirror, not anger, something colder, something with a deadline. Gerald's 60th birthday was 10 months away. By March of year 5, Slate Systems closed its Series A round. $40 million valuation. I owned 55%. 65 employees. 2,000 restaurant clients across 30 states. I hired a personal driver named Marcus. Former Army. 6'2", quiet in a way that made rooms adjust when he walked in. He drove a black Lincoln that I didn't need but had earned. I bought a penthouse in downtown Austin. I furnished it simply. No art on the walls yet. I still wore the same 3 blazers in rotation. I still didn't post on social media. I was building a life, not a brand. Uncle Ray called in April. "Your dad's 60th is in June. Your mother asked me to ask you to come." I stared out the window at the Austin skyline. "Did she ask? Or did he?" "She asked. Gerald doesn't know I'm calling. Honestly, he probably assumes you won't show up." I was quiet for a long time, long enough that Ray said, "You still there?" "I'm thinking." I brought it to Dr. Nguyen the next week. We'd been doing sessions for 2 years by then. She knew the whole map, every phone call, every holiday, every scar Gerald had left with words that sounded reasonable on the surface and drew blood underneath. "What do you want from going?" she asked. I looked at the fern. It had grown since I started coming. Straighter now. "I want it to be over. I want to stop being the version of me that he invented." She nodded, wrote nothing down. That meant it was important. I called Ray that night. "I'll be there, but I'm doing it my way." After we hung up, I opened my desk drawer, took out a business card, cream stock, embossed lettering. Tori Warden, CEO, Slate Systems. I slid it into my wallet. Then I called Marcus. "June 15th, Connecticut. Clear your schedule." "Yes, ma'am." 3 words. That's all it took to set the final piece in motion. But before that night arrived, Gerald would do one more thing, one final thing. The thing that almost made me cancel everything. And the thing that guaranteed I wouldn't. 2 weeks before the party, my phone rang at 8 a.m. The caller ID showed a New York area code. I picked up, expecting a sales call. Ms. Warden, this is David Park from Crestline Ventures. We're currently evaluating Slate Systems for a potential growth stage investment. Of course, how can I help? A beat of silence. The professional kind. The kind that means someone's choosing their words carefully. I'll be direct. Someone claiming to be your father contacted our firm yesterday. He suggested we, and I'm quoting, do our due diligence on her mental health history before committing capital. The room tilted, just for a second. Here's what I pieced together afterward. Gerald had been Googling my name periodically for years. Kyle let it slip once. Dad checks on you online sometimes. To Gerald, that was parenting. He'd seen my name connected to Slate Systems in a trade article, but never read past the headline. He didn't know I was CEO. He didn't know the valuation. He just saw the word investment next to his dropout daughter's name and decided to do what he always did, control the story before anyone else could tell it. He found Crestline's general number on their website and called. He said you had a history of instability, that you dropped out of college due to psychological issues, and that your judgment was, in his words, compromised. I pressed my palm flat against my desk. Is there something we should know? David asked. My voice came out even, steady, professional. 5 years of practice. There is nothing to know, Mr. Park. I'd encourage you to speak with Patricia Voss, my lead investor, or any of our current partners. My track record speaks for itself. That's what we figured. Patricia already vouched for you in the strongest terms. I just wanted to give you the courtesy of knowing. I appreciate that. I hung up. Sat still. Then I slammed my hand on the desk so hard the pen cup fell over. Gerald had called my investors. Not a cousin over Thanksgiving dinner. Not a college friend. A venture capital firm managing 9 figures in assets. He'd tried to torpedo a multi-million-dollar investment with a lie about my sanity. This wasn't a father being disappointed. This wasn't tough love. This was a man who would rather see his daughter fail publicly than lose control of the story he told about her. I called Uncle Ray. My voice was flat. He called my investors, Ray. Told them I'm mentally unstable. Silence. Then, Jesus, Tori. Am I still coming to the party? Ray took a breath. Are you? I looked at the business card in my wallet. Cream stock, embossed. I wouldn't miss it. June 15th, late afternoon, Connecticut. Marcus pulled the Lincoln to the curb 3 houses down from my parents' home in Westport. Through the windshield, I could see the house where I grew up. White colonial, black shutters, a porch I used to read on until the streetlights came on. Tonight it was dressed for a celebration. White lanterns hung from the elm trees along the front walk. A catering van sat in the driveway. Through the tall windows, I could see people moving, laughing, holding champagne flutes that caught the golden light. 43 guests. I'd asked Uncle Ray for the count. I checked myself in the visor mirror. Black blazer, tailored. White silk blouse, black trousers, simple heels. A small face watch on my left wrist. The first expensive thing I ever bought myself. The week Slate hit $1 million in revenue. No other jewelry, no statement pieces. I didn't need the clothes to speak. The card would do that. I touched my jacket pocket. Still there. You good? Marcus asked from the front seat. He was watching me in the rear view, his expression neutral. He'd driven me to pitch meetings, investor dinners, late nights at the office. He'd never seen my hands shake. They were shaking now. Park here. When I text you, come to the front door. Just walk in and say the car is ready. Copy. I opened the door. The summer air hit me. Warm, thick with fresh-cut grass and someone's perfume drifting from the backyard. I walked up the path I'd walked 1,000 times as a kid. Past the mailbox with Warden stenciled in black. Past the garden Mom replanted every spring. The front door was open. I stepped inside. Mom saw me first. Brenda Warden stood near the kitchen threshold, holding a glass of white wine she clearly wasn't drinking. Her eyes went wide, then soft, then wet. She set the glass down and crossed the room. Her arms wrapped around me. Tighter than Christmas, tighter than the airport, tighter than any hug she'd given me since I was small. I'm glad you're here, she whispered. Over her shoulder, Gerald turned. He stood by the fireplace, surrounded by 3 men in sport coats, the golf friends. He held a champagne glass loosely. He registered my face, and for one flicker of a second, something moved behind his eyes. Surprise, maybe unease. Then the mask slid on. "Well, look who showed up." Same words he'd used at Christmas 3 years ago. Same tone, like I was a weather event he hadn't planned for. I smiled, said nothing, and walked into the room. The party moved around me like a current. I drifted through it, a handshake here, a polite nod there. I recognized most faces: Aunt Pam with her prayer chain smile, Cousin Jacob, the VP Gerald loved to mention, neighbors from down the street who used to bring us pie on Sundays. They were friendly, cautious, the way people are friendly to someone they've been warned about. "Tori, how are you, honey?" Aunt Pam tilted her head at a precise 45-degree angle of pity. "Are you still in food service?" Something like that. She waited for more. I gave her nothing. She sipped her wine and moved on. Gerald found me near the appetizer table and steered me by the elbow toward his golf foursome, 3 men in their 60s with firm handshakes and country club tans. "Gentlemen, this is my daughter Tori." He paused just long enough. "She's finding herself." A polite chuckle from the group. One of them, a man named Ed, looked at me with genuine curiosity. Gerald moved on before Ed could ask a follow-up. Next, Jessica's parents, Richard and Maureen. The in-laws Gerald had already briefed about my emotional problems. Gerald placed his hand on my shoulder, proprietary, warm, performing. "This is Tori, our free spirit. Didn't quite finish the college thing." He smiled like he was sharing a charming family anecdote. "But we love her anyway, don't we?" Maureen's smile was tight. Richard looked at his shoes. I said, "Nice to meet you both." My voice was steady. My eyes were clear. Kyle passed behind me as Gerald moved to greet another cluster of guests. My brother's hand found mine, squeezed once. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should say something." "Don't. Not tonight. This is his show." Kyle's jaw tightened. He nodded and stepped away. I stood alone for a moment near the window. Outside, the lanterns swayed in a warm breeze. Inside, 43 people drank and laughed and lived inside a story Gerald had written. A story where I was the cautionary tale, the dropout, the failure, the one they loved anyway. I slipped my hand into my blazer pocket. The card was there, waiting. Let him finish his show, I thought. The script is about to change. At 7:30, Gerald tapped his champagne glass with a butter knife. The room settled. Conversations dissolved into silence. 43 faces turned toward the man standing at the head of the dining table, framed by white lanterns and a banner that read, "Happy 60th Gerald." He was good at this. I'll give him that. Gerald Warden could hold a room the way some people hold a tune, effortlessly, with the kind of authority that made you forget he'd practiced every word in the bathroom mirror. "Thank you all for being here tonight. 60 years. He shook his head with rehearsed wonder. "I look around this room and I see every person who made those years worth living." He thanked Brenda. She smiled from her chair, the smile of a woman who had learned to perform gratitude on cue. He thanked his golf buddies, his former colleagues, the neighbors, then the children. "Kyle," Gerald raised his glass toward my brother. "Couldn't be prouder. College degree, great career, a beautiful fiancé." He gestured to Jessica. The room applauded. Kyle shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with praise he hadn't asked for. Then Gerald turned to me. His voice changed, softer, heavier. The voice he used when he told relatives he worried about me. The voice of a man performing sorrow. "And Tori." He found me at the back of the room. "My daughter." A pause that held the weight of 5 years. "The one who didn't finish college." He shook his head slowly, smiled with closed lips. "But we love her anyway, don't we?" Scattered laughter, a few sympathetic nods. Someone near the kitchen whispered something I couldn't hear. Aunt Pam pressed her hand to her chest like she was watching a sad commercial. Brenda closed her eyes. Kyle's knuckles went white around his fork. Uncle Ray set his glass on the table with a deliberate clink. And I stood at the back of that room, spine straight, face calm, hands still. I smiled. Not a brave smile, not a bitter one, a patient one. I slid my hand into my pocket. My fingers closed around the business card. 5 years. He just did it one last time. Good. The applause faded. Glasses clinked. The room returned to its hum of small talk and laughter. I moved. Not fast, not dramatic. I walked the length of the dining room the way I walked into investor meetings. Measured, unhurried, certain. Past the appetizer table, past Aunt Pam, past the golf foursome. Every pair of eyes in the room tracked me without realizing they were watching. Gerald was still standing, champagne in hand, basking in the warm residue of his own toast. I stopped in front of him, close enough that no one could miss it, far enough that it wasn't confrontational. "Happy birthday, Dad," my voice carried. Not loud, just clear. The room quieted by instinct, the way a room always quiets when it senses something is about to happen. "I brought you a gift." I reached into my blazer pocket. "It's small, but I think you'll appreciate it." I placed the business card in his open hand. Gerald looked down. His eyes moved across the text. I watched them, left to right, then back again, the way you reread a sentence that doesn't make sense the first time. Tory Warden, CEO, Slate Systems. His lips parted. No sound came out. Slate Systems. The company he'd raved about at Thanksgiving dinner. The company he'd called brilliant. The company he'd wished his daughter had the brains to build. His eyes lifted, met mine. I watched the recognition hit, not all at once but in waves. First confusion, then disbelief, then a slow, flooding horror that started at his pupils and spread outward like ink in water. His fingers loosened. The champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble floor. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. 43 guests stared at Gerald Warden, his hand still open, his face white, champagne and broken glass pooling at his polished shoes. No one moved. No one breathed. I stood exactly where I was, hands at my sides, my heart hammering so hard I was sure the whole room could hear it. But my face gave them nothing. The silence lasted 4 seconds. It felt like 40. Someone near the kitchen said, "What happened? What's on the card?" Gerald didn't answer. He couldn't. He stood frozen, staring at the small rectangle in his hand like it had caught fire. Kyle stepped forward. He took the card gently from Gerald's fingers, turned it over, and read it aloud. His voice was steady, but I could see the vein in his neck pulsing. Tory Warden, CEO, Slate Systems. A murmur rolled through the room, low, electric, gathering speed. Slate Systems? Ed from the golf group frowned. "Wait, isn't that the company?" "Oh my God," Aunt Pam said. Her hand was on her mouth now, not her chest. Cousin Jacob, the VP, the golden standard Gerald measured everyone against, pulled out his phone and typed something. His eyes went wide. He showed his screen to the person next to him. They showed the next person. Maureen, Jessica's mother, looked at Gerald with an expression I'd never seen on a stranger's face before, pity for the wrong person. She turned to her husband. Richard's jaw was tight. Uncle Ray didn't move from his chair. He lifted his glass an inch. Not a toast, not a performance, just a quiet salute. And his eyes were red. Gerald found his voice. It came out cracked. "Tory," he swallowed. "Is this—" "It's real, Dad. It's been real for 5 years. Why didn't you tell me?" The question landed in the center of the room like a stone in still water. The entire room held its breath. I looked at my father. At the man who had shaped my childhood and shattered my 20s. At the man who bragged about my company while burying my name. I did, I said. My voice didn't waver. You called it a laptop fantasy, remember? Gerald's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Behind me, I heard my mother. Not words, just the soft, strangled sound of a woman who'd held it together for 5 years and couldn't hold it anymore. Brenda Warden was crying, her hand pressed over her lips, tears running silently down her wrist. The front door opened. Marcus stepped inside. Black suit, posture that said military before his mouth said anything at all. He scanned the room once, a habit, not a choice, and then looked directly at me. Ms. Warden, the car is ready whenever you are. Ms. Warden. 2 words, said with the practiced calm of someone who said them every day. Every head in the room turned, from Marcus to me, from the driver in the doorway to the woman Gerald had introduced 20 minutes ago as a dropout who couldn't finish college. Gerald looked at Marcus, looked at me. His face was doing something I'd never seen, not anger, not sadness, but the expression of a man watching a building he constructed brick by brick collapse from the inside. I turned to him one last time. I wanted you to be proud of me, Dad. My voice was quiet, steady, no tremor, no heat. For a long time, that was the only thing I wanted. I let that settle. But you chose to be ashamed of someone you never bothered to know. Gerald's hand moved, reaching toward me, or toward the card, or toward something he'd already lost. I'll never know, because I didn't wait. I'm not here to prove you wrong. I'm here to stop needing you to see me. I turned to my mother, took her hands. She was shaking. I pulled her close and whispered against her hair. I love you, Mom. Call me when you're ready. She nodded. Couldn't speak. I found Kyle, took his hand, squeezed it. I'm proud of you. Truly. This doesn't change that. His eyes were glassy. He squeezed back. Then Uncle Ray. He stood from his chair. He didn't say a word. Just wrapped his arms around me the way he had when I was 9 years old and fell off his porch and refused to cry. I stepped back, straightened my blazer, walked to the door. Marcus held it open. I didn't look back. Not because I was too proud, because if I looked back, I would see my father's face, and some part of me, the little girl who used to ride on his shoulders at the park, might have stayed. And I couldn't stay. Not anymore. The night air hit my skin as I stepped out. Warm, quiet, the lantern still glowing behind me, the Lincoln waiting at the curb. I walked toward it. Behind me, through the open door, I heard nothing. No shouting, no footsteps, just the enormous suffocating silence of 43 people who had just watched a story rewrite itself. Marcus pulled away from the curb slowly. No rush. The headlights swept across the front of the house, and then we were past it, turning onto the tree-lined road I used to bike down every summer. I watched the house shrink in the side mirror, the white columns, the lanterns, the warm glow of a party that had gone very, very quiet. Marcus drove. I sat. Neither of us spoke. We were 2 miles from the highway when it hit me. Not the satisfaction, not the relief, just the weight. All at once, like a dam breaking, 5 years of held breath releasing in a single, silent flood. I cried. Not the way I cried in my dorm room 5 years ago. Not the way I cried when Uncle Ray said he was proud of me. This was different. This was the kind of crying that comes from a place so deep you don't have a name for it. I wasn't crying because I won. I was crying because I'd spent 5 years hoping I wouldn't have to do this. I was crying for the father I lost on a phone call when I was 23. For the Christmases I drove to the airport alone. For every time someone said, "Your dad told me," and I knew what came next. I was crying because a little girl who once believed her father was the tallest man in the world just handed him a piece of paper and watched him shrink. Marcus reached over the seat without turning around and placed a tissue on the armrest beside me. He said nothing. He didn't need to. I wiped my face. Breathed in, breathed out. I opened my phone. 7 missed calls. Gerald, 3, Brenda, 2, Kyle, 1, Dana, 1. I didn't listen to any of them. Instead, I opened notes and typed 5 words. I showed up. I'm enough. Then I called Dr. Nguyen's office and booked an appointment for the following Tuesday. The highway opened up ahead of us. Dark sky, clear lane. I leaned my head against the cool glass and closed my eyes. It wasn't over. I knew that. But the hardest part was done. I had introduced myself. The next morning I was back in Austin. Same desk, same view of the skyline through floor-to-ceiling glass. But something in the room was different, or maybe something in me was. I called my attorney at 9 sharp. Rachel, I need you to draft a cease and desist letter. She didn't flinch. Rachel Briggs had been my counsel since the Series A. She'd seen the Reynolds situation. She knew the backstory. Who's the recipient? My father, Gerald Warden. A brief pause. Professional, not personal. What specifically are we addressing? 2 documented instances of unauthorized contact with my business associates, Reynolds Hospitality in year 3 and Crestline Ventures 2 weeks ago. Both times he made false statements about my mental fitness to conduct business. That's tortious interference and defamation per se under Connecticut and Texas law. I want it clean, Rachel. No emotion, just the facts and the consequences if he continues. Tori, are you sure? He's your father. That's exactly why it has to be formal. Informal didn't work for 5 years. Rachel said she'd have the draft by end of day. I spent the next hour composing an email. Not to Gerald, to the family. I revised it 4 times before it felt right. Clear without being cold, honest without being vindictive. I love this family, but I won't accept being lied about anymore. If anyone has questions about my life, my career, or my well-being, ask me directly. Not Dad. I'm not the person he described, and I think some of you are beginning to understand that. My door is open. It always has been. I hit send, set the phone face down, pressed my palms flat on the desk and breathed. Patricia Voss called that afternoon. I heard what happened. News travels fast. Good news should. Her voice was warm, certain. You handled it with more grace than anyone I know. The board is behind you 100%. I thanked her. We talked for a few minutes about next quarter's projections. Normal work, normal life. The kind of conversation I'd fought 5 years to have without looking over my shoulder. When we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my office and realized something. The cease and desist wasn't punishment. The email wasn't revenge. They were borders. Real, visible lines that said, you may love me, but you may not lie about me. You may disagree with me, but you may not sabotage me. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors with locks. And I'd just changed the key. Uncle Ray called 2 days after the party. Thought you'd want a report from the front. Go ahead. Gerald had locked himself in his study the entire day after his birthday. Brenda brought him coffee twice. He didn't touch it. The caterer came to pick up the rented glassware at noon, and Gerald didn't come out to sign the invoice. Brenda handled it. Ray said Gerald spent hours on his computer, searching, reading. He found everything, Tori, Forbes, TechCrunch, the Series A announcement, your LinkedIn, all of it. I stared at the ceiling. He called Kyle that night, asked if Kyle knew. Kyle said no. Ray paused. Then Kyle said something I didn't expect. What? He said, no, Dad, I didn't, because you made sure none of us knew the real Tori. I closed my eyes. And your mother? Ray's voice shifted, softer. Gerald asked Brenda why she didn't tell him. She said, and I'm only telling you this because she told me directly. She said, tell you what, Gerald? You never listen. You never listen to her. You never listen to me. My breath stopped. Brenda, my quiet, careful, casserole-making mother, the woman who hadn't contradicted Gerald in 30 years of marriage. She really said that? Word for word. I didn't know what to do with that information. It was too big to feel all at once, so I put it somewhere safe and moved on. Has he tried to call me? 4 times, left voicemails, First one was, Tori, we need to talk. Second was, I didn't know. Third was just, please. And the fourth? Silence. 30 seconds of dead air. Then he hung up. I imagined Gerald sitting in his study, surrounded by bookshelves and framed certificates and a lifetime of curated accomplishments, staring at a phone that wouldn't ring back. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt like someone had pulled a splinter out of a wound that had been infected for 5 years. It hurt worse coming out than it did going in. But the infection was over. The fallout wasn't dramatic. It was social, quiet, relentless. Within a week, the story had traveled through the entire Warden family tree like water through cracks in a foundation. Not because anyone was gossiping maliciously, but because the truth, once spoken, has a velocity that lies can never match. Nana Ruth called me on a Wednesday morning. She was crying before I picked up. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I believed every word he said. I should have called you more. I should have asked. It's not your fault, Nana. It is. A grandmother is supposed to know. Her voice broke. You must have been so lonely. I bit the inside of my cheek. I had some good people. Well, now you have me again. And I'm not going anywhere. The golf group was less forgiving. Ray told me Gerald showed up for his usual Saturday round and felt the temperature shift before anyone said a word. Ed, the one who'd seemed curious about me at the party, was the one who said it. Gerald, I've known you 15 years. You sat at my table and trashed your own daughter, and she's running a company worth more than every business on this street combined? That's the worst thing I've ever heard a father do. Gerald didn't finish the round. Then came the in-laws. Jessica's parents, Richard and Maureen, called Kyle. Maureen was direct. Your father told us Tori had emotional problems. He looked us in the eye at our first family event and lied. Kyle, that concerns us. Kyle told me about the call. He sounded tired. They're not mad at you. They're mad at Dad. But it's creating tension. Jessica's worried. I'm sorry, Kyle. Don't be. This is on him. All of it. The cease and desist arrived at Gerald's house on a Thursday. Rachel confirmed delivery. Signature required. Uncle Ray told me Gerald sat at the kitchen table reading it. He read it twice. Then he folded it, put it back in the envelope, and sat there for a very long time. He didn't call anyone that night. He didn't call anyone the next day either. The man who had controlled the Warden family narrative for 5 years was, for the first time, out of words. 2 weeks after the party, Uncle Ray showed up at my office in Austin. He didn't call ahead, just appeared in the lobby holding a brown paper bag and wearing a flannel shirt that probably cost $12. Drove down from Portland, he said. Brought you a sandwich. We ate on the rooftop terrace of my building. Turkey clubs. Like when I was 10 and he'd take me fishing and we'd eat gas station sandwiches on the dock. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. This is from your father. He asked me to bring it because he doesn't have your address. I told him I'd deliver it, but I wouldn't lobby for him. I'm the mailman, not the ambassador. I took the envelope, plain white. My name handwritten on the front in Gerald's precise accountant's script. No return address. I opened it at my desk that evening, alone. The letter was 2 pages, handwritten. His penmanship was slightly uneven. He'd been pressing too hard with the pen in places. He started by admitting he was wrong. That part took half a page. Then he pivoted, and I felt the old machinery begin to turn. I was scared you were ruining your life. I didn't know how else to protect you. Every time I heard about another friend's child succeeding, I felt like I'd failed as a father. I realize now that I wasn't protecting you. I was protecting myself. That last sentence surprised me. It was the most honest thing Gerald Warden had ever written. He ended with, I'm proud of you. I always was. I just didn't know how to show it. I folded the letter, set it on my desk, stared at it. I didn't believe the last part. Not yet. Maybe not ever. You don't spend 5 years telling 40 people your daughter is a failure and then claim you were proud all along. That's not how pride works. But the part about protecting himself, that rang true. Gerald wasn't a monster. He was a man with a very small definition of success and a very large need to control the story. When I stepped outside his definition, he didn't know how to follow, so he rewrote me into something he could explain. I brought the letter to Dr. Nguyen. I don't hate him, I said, but I don't trust him, and I don't know if I ever will. She looked at me. Trust isn't a switch, Tori. It's a bridge, and he burned his side years ago. If he wants to rebuild it, he does the work, not you. That night I sent Gerald an email. 12 words. I received your letter. Thank you. I'm not ready to talk yet. When I am, I'll reach out. Please respect that. He didn't reply. For the first time in 5 years, Gerald Warden respected a boundary I set. It was the smallest step, but it was the first real one. My mother called on a Sunday in July. I was on my balcony watching the sun go down over Austin, holding a glass of iced tea I hadn't taken a single sip from. Her name lit up the screen. Not home, not mom and dad. I'd changed the contact to just mom 2 years ago, a small act of separation that felt enormous at the time. Tori? Her voice was different, steadier, like a woman who'd been practicing what to say. Hi, Mom. A pause. Then she spoke, and I realized she hadn't been practicing at all. She was just finally telling the truth. I'm sorry I never stood up for you. I was a coward. I watched your father rewrite who you were, and I stood in that kitchen and said nothing, year after year. I gripped the railing. I knew it was wrong. Every time he picked up the phone and called someone to tell them you were struggling, I knew, and I told myself it was easier to stay quiet than to fight him. She took a shaky breath. There is no excuse for that. You're right, I said. My voice was thick. There isn't. I heard her swallow. That hurt more than anything he said, Mom, because I always knew you loved me, and you let him do it anyway. She cried. Not the quiet kind from the party, real crying, the kind that breaks open a chest. I know. I'm not asking for excuses. I'm asking for different. I'm seeing a counselor. She said it quickly, like she'd been saving it. Gerald doesn't know, but I needed to talk to someone. I needed to understand why I stayed silent. Now I was crying. I'm glad, Mom. I really am. We stayed on the phone for 2 hours that night. I told her things I'd never told anyone in the family. About sleeping on the office couch, about Patricia Voss. About the night I won a SAS Industry Award and stood on stage accepting it with no one in the audience who shared my name. I wish I'd been there, she said. Me too, Mom. Me too. When we hung up, the iced tea was warm and the sky was dark, and something that had been locked in my chest for 5 years had shifted. Not opened, not healed, but shifted. The way a bone resets before it can begin to mend. Brenda Warden was never going to be the mother who charged into battle, but she was, for the first time, becoming the mother who refused to look away. And right now, that was enough. 6 months after the party. December. My office. I keep 2 business cards in my desk drawer. One is a fresh print, the kind I hand to investors and conference contacts. The other is the one I carried in my blazer that night in June. It has a small crease from where Gerald's fingers folded around it before the glass fell. I don't know why I kept it. Maybe because it's proof. Not proof of my company or my title. Proof that I showed up. People ask me sometimes if that night was worth it. If I regret it. If I'd do it differently. I tell them I didn't go to that party to win. I went because if I didn't, I would have spent the rest of my life living inside Gerald's version of me. The dropout, the waitress, the one they loved anyway. And that version was a prison I built by never walking out the door. Slate is still growing. 65 employees now, a new round of funding and discussions. I was invited to speak at a restaurant tech conference in Chicago. When I introduced myself on stage, my name is Tori Warden, CEO of Slate Systems. I didn't flinch. I didn't feel the need to add, and yes, I went to college. Or, it's a real company. Or any of the disclaimers I used to rehearse in my bathroom mirror. That might be the biggest change. Not the revenue, not the valuation. The fact that I can say my own name in a room full of strangers and feel like it belongs there. I spent 5 years thinking I needed my father's approval. Turns out, I just needed my own. I still haven't spoken to Gerald directly. Not because I hate him. Not because I'm punishing him. Because I'm waiting to see if he changes because he was exposed. or because he actually understands what he did. There's a difference. And after 5 years of half-truths, I've learned to wait for the real thing. Uncle Ray gives me updates. I don't ask for them. He just calls on Sundays and weaves them in between stories about his furniture orders and whatever book he's reading. Gerald started therapy, a counselor in Fairfield, Tuesdays at 4. Some weeks he goes, some weeks he doesn't. Ray says the weeks he skips are the weeks he'd have to talk about the hard stuff. He's trying, Ray told me once. I'll give him that. Whether he's trying hard enough, that's for you to decide. Gerald sends me an email every month. Short. Never more than 3 sentences. No demands. No guilt. Saw Slate mentioned on Bloomberg today. Hope you're well. And last month, happy birthday, Tori. No strings attached. I read every one. I haven't replied to any of them, but I haven't deleted them either. They sit in a folder I labeled pending. Kyle told me something last week that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. Gerald dismantled his study. The room he'd spent 30 years filling with framed degrees, CPA certificates, photos of himself shaking hands with the county comptroller, gone. He boxed everything up and put it in the garage. He left one photo on the wall, me, 5 years old, sitting on his shoulders at Riverside Park, both of us laughing, my hands gripping his hair, his hands gripping my ankles. Kyle sent me a picture of the wall, just the one frame, a single nail. I stared at that photo for a long time. That man, the one in the picture, the one holding me up, that's the father I remember having. That's the father who disappeared somewhere between my first day of college and a phone call in October. I don't know if Gerald can find that man again. Maybe this study is just another performance. Maybe dismantling the trophies is his way of rebuilding the narrative. Look at me, I've changed. Or maybe it's real. Maybe he took down every frame because he finally realized that none of those certificates ever told him who his daughter was. I don't know yet, but the photo stays, and so does the door. If you're still here, if you've been listening this whole time, I want to say something directly to you, not as a CEO, not as someone with a revenge story, just as a woman who spent too many years letting someone else write her name tag. If someone in your family is lying about you, reshaping you into a version that serves their pride and buries yours, you don't need a $40 million company to prove them wrong. You don't need proof at all. The only thing you need is the willingness to say out loud or just to yourself, the version of me you're telling people about is not who I am, and I refuse to live inside that story. I didn't cut Gerald out of my life, but I drew a line so clear that no one, not him, not my mother, not my brother, not a single cousin at a single holiday, could pretend it wasn't there. That line isn't a wall, it's a door. The key is on Gerald's side. If he changes, truly, deeply, not just because he got caught but because he understands, the door is open. It always has been. But I'm not standing on my side of it waiting anymore. I have a company to run. I have people who depend on me. I have a life that doesn't need anyone's permission to exist. It's Tuesday morning in Austin. The skyline is orange. My coffee is hot. My phone just buzzed. A new email from Gerald. I can see the preview. Thinking of you today. Just wanted you to know. I look at it for a moment. I almost smile. Then I set the phone down, pick up my coffee, and watch the sun come up over a city that knows my name, even if it took my family 5 years to learn it. My name is Tori Warden, and I finally get to introduce myself. And that's where I'll leave it, for now. If Tori's story touched something in you, type "my story" in the comments. Or share the boundary you wish you'd set sooner. If you've ever been mislabeled by someone who should have known you best, you're not alone. Like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one. And check the description for another story I think you'll connect with. See you in the next one. You want to go to college? Good. Figure it out yourself, my mother said, while sliding a $120,000 tuition check across the table to my little sister. Same table, same dinner, same parents, different daughter. 9 years later, I stood in the back of my sister's wedding. A wedding paid for by the same parents who couldn't spare a dime for my future. My mother scanned the room and whispered to my father, "Why does it feel like something's missing?" Before anyone could answer, the groom turned pale. He looked at me, then at Julia, then back at me. And he said one word that silenced 200 guests. What that word was, and what happened next, destroyed a wedding, a family's lie, and a 9-year silence, all in under 4 minutes. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where you're watching from. My name is Paige Connolly. I'm 27 years old. And this is not a revenge story. This is a survival story that happens to end with justice. Now, let me take you back 9 years, to the dinner that changed everything. I grew up in a white colonial house on Maple Ridge Lane in West Hartford, Connecticut. 4 bedrooms, 2-car garage, a lawn my father mowed every Saturday like clockwork. From the outside, we looked like a family that had it together. From the inside, well, that depends on which daughter you ask. My mother, Donna Connolly, had a system. It wasn't written down anywhere, but everyone in the house understood it. Julia was the investment, I was the overhead. Julia got piano lessons. I got hand-me-down textbooks. Julia got a new dress for every school dance. I got told to make do with what you have. And my mother didn't hide it. She introduced us at neighborhood barbecues like a product line. This is my daughter, Julia. She's going to do great things. Then she'd gesture vaguely in my direction. And this is Paige. No prediction, no pride, just a name. The refrigerator was the museum of Julia's life. Cheerleading photos, honor society certificates, a dried corsage from homecoming taped to the freezer handle, every inch covered. One morning, sophomore year, I stuck my honor roll certificate up with a magnet right in the center. By the time I got home from school, it was gone. The fridge was getting cluttered, my mother said, not looking up from her magazine. My father, Richard, was a different kind of problem. He wasn't cruel, he was absent. Emotionally, strategically absent. He'd catch me in the hallway sometimes, away from my mother's earshot, and squeeze my shoulder. I'm proud of you, kid. 5 words. Always whispered. Always when Donna wasn't looking. As if being proud of me was something that required secrecy. I told myself it would change when I got into college. I got in. With a scholarship that covered half. I just needed them to cover the other half. What happened at that dinner table is something I replay in my head to this day. May 2008. I was 18. Senior year was ending in 11 days, and I had a plan. I'd printed everything out. Scholarship letter, tuition breakdown, a 4-year budget I'd built on a spreadsheet, income from part-time work, estimated expenses, the gap I needed them to fill. $62,000 over 4 years. I'd rehearsed my pitch in the bathroom mirror 3 times. Dinner was roast chicken. Julia sat across from me, scrolling her phone. My father cut his meat in silence. I waited until my mother finished her second glass of wine, then set the folder on the table. I got into UConn, I said. Half scholarship. I just need help with the rest. My mother didn't open the folder. Paige, we've talked about this. We haven't, actually. Not once. You need to learn independence. She said it like a diagnosis. The real world doesn't hand you things. I pointed out the obvious. You're paying Julia's full tuition at Syracuse. Julia's situation is different. My mother folded her napkin. Precise. Unhurried. She has potential that needs nurturing. You're more resilient. I looked at my father. He stared at his plate. His fork didn't move. He said nothing. Julia stirred her water glass. Didn't look up. Didn't say a word in my defense. Not one. This discussion is over, my mother said. If you want it bad enough, you'll find a way. That's what strong people do. I gathered my papers. My hands shook. I wouldn't cry in front of them. I wouldn't give her that. Later in the hallway, my father caught my arm. I thought, finally he'd say something. Your mother has her reasons, he said. Just give it time. Then he walked away. Back to the living room. Back to the television. Back to the version of peace that required my silence. That night I packed one suitcase. I had $340 in my savings account, and I made a decision I haven't reversed in 9 years. 5:14 a.m. The kitchen was dark. I set my house key on the counter next to the coffee maker, the one my mother ran every morning at 6:15, so she'd find it first. No note. I didn't have anything left to explain. The garage light was on. My father sat in his Buick, engine off, hands on the wheel. He saw me through the windshield. I saw him. He didn't open the door. I didn't knock on the glass. We just looked at each other for 3 seconds that felt like a year. Then I turned and walked to the bus stop on Farmington Avenue. Campus was 90 minutes away. My dorm room had a thin mattress, a metal desk, and a window that didn't close all the way. No sheets, no blankets. I'd forgotten mine. I slept in my jacket that first night. By the end of the week, I had 3 jobs: dishwasher at Fratelli's, an Italian restaurant off Main Street, overnight cashier at a Sunoco station on Route 44, cleaning crew at the residence halls on weekends. My schedule was a jigsaw puzzle with no picture on the box: 4 hours of sleep here, a 90-minute nap there. I ate whatever Fratelli's was throwing out at closing. 2 weeks in, I called my mother. I don't know why. Maybe I thought distance had softened something. "You made your choice," she said. "Don't call to make me feel guilty." She hung up. 7 seconds. That was the whole conversation. I saved her number under a new name. Do not answer. That evening, a text came through from Julia. I stared at it for a long time. "Mom says you're being dramatic. Just come home and apologize." So that was the story she was telling. I wasn't the daughter they abandoned. I was the daughter who left. The difficult one. The dramatic one. I didn't know it then, but that phone call was the last time I'd speak to my mother for nearly a decade. And when we finally stood face to face again, she wouldn't recognize the person I'd become. Freshman year nearly broke me. I fell asleep in organic chemistry twice. Spilled boiling water on my left hand during a dinner rush at Fratelli's. 2nd-degree burn, 3 fingers. Wrapped it in gauze from the gas station first aid kit and went to my morning lecture 40 minutes later. My GPA hovered at 2.9, dangerously close to losing the scholarship that was keeping me enrolled. Professor Alan Whitfield noticed. He taught my Intro to Health Sciences seminar. Silver-haired, bow-tied, the kind of man who actually reads student papers instead of skimming them. After class one Tuesday, he asked me to stay. "You're exhausted," he said. Not a question. I gave him the short version. He didn't pity me. He pulled out a folder of internal grants and research assistantships. "You're too smart to burn out before sophomore year," he said. "Let me help you find a way that doesn't cost your hands or your sleep." He got me into a paid research position in his lab. It wasn't much, $400 a month, but it replaced the overnight shifts at Sunoco. Meanwhile, my mother was busy. Thanksgiving came. I wasn't invited, though I learned later that Donna told the entire family I'd been asked and refused. "She doesn't want to see us," my mother reportedly said, dabbing her eyes with a napkin. "We've tried everything." My Aunt Helen, Donna's younger sister, called me the week after. "Your mother is heartbroken, Paige. Why are you doing this to her?" I tried to explain. Helen cut me off. "Donna would never do that. You always were the difficult one." The line went dead. And just like that, I lost my mother's side of the family too. That same week, Julia posted a photo on Facebook. A brand new Audi A4 parked in our parents' driveway, a red bow on the hood. Caption: "Best parents ever." My mother's comment underneath: "Anything for my baby girl." 87 likes. I took a screenshot, not out of bitterness, out of clarity. That was the night I stopped hoping they'd change and started building a life that didn't need them to. Lena Novak sat next to me in Biology 201 on the first day of sophomore year. She had dark hair pulled back in a rubber band, circles under her eyes deeper than mine, and a thermos of coffee the size of a small fire extinguisher. "You look how I feel," she said. "Thanks." "It's a compliment. It means you're still showing up." Lena was pre-med. Her parents had emigrated from the Czech Republic when she was 6. They ran a dry cleaning shop in Bridgeport and couldn't afford tuition any more than mine could, the difference being hers actually wanted to help. They just couldn't. My parents could. They just chose not to. She became the first person I told the whole story to. All of it. The dinner, the check, the Audi, the Facebook post. I told her on a bench outside the science building at 11 at night, both of us eating gas station sandwiches because neither of us could afford the dining hall. Lena didn't flinch. She didn't offer sympathy. She wiped mustard off her chin and said, You don't owe them a redemption arc, Paige. You owe yourself a life. I carried those words for years. That semester, I started writing a research paper for Dr. Whitfield's lab. 12 pages on data applications in patient record management, small clinic systems, workflow optimization, interoperability gaps. I wrote most of it between midnight shifts, in the staff break room at Fratelli's, between loads of industrial dishes. It was dry, technical, and deeply unsexy. But it was the first thing I'd ever built that felt completely mine. Dr. Whitfield read the draft in one sitting. This could be something, he said. Not just a paper. Something real. That paper, those 12 pages I wrote between midnight shifts, would eventually become the foundation of something I couldn't have imagined. But that part comes later. One night, sorting through junk mail, I found a forwarded email from my father. No subject line, no greeting, just 7 words. I hope you're eating enough. Dad. He didn't ask where I was, didn't offer help, didn't mention my mother. Just 7 words floating in digital silence. I read it twice. Then I closed my laptop and went back to work. The end of sophomore year almost took me under. Fratelli's closed. The owner retired, the building sold. Just like that, 40% of my income disappeared overnight. I sat on my dorm bed and did the math 3 times, hoping the numbers would change. They didn't. I had enough savings for 6 weeks of rent on my shared room. After that, nothing. I picked up my phone, scrolled to Do Not Answer. My thumb hovered over the green button for 11 seconds. I counted. I put the phone down. Instead, I walked to the campus job board and signed up for 2 more gigs, tutoring freshmen in statistics and freelance data entry for a local insurance office on weekends. My schedule compressed to 3 hours of sleep a night. Some mornings, I couldn't remember driving to campus. Lena started leaving granola bars in my backpack without telling me. Meanwhile, Julia was living her semester abroad in Florence. I know this because her Instagram existed, even though I'd unfollowed her. The algorithm didn't care about my boundaries. A photo surfaced on my feed at 2 a.m. Julia on a terrace overlooking the Arno. Glass of wine in hand, golden hour light on her face. Caption, living my best life. #grateful. My mother had reposted it with her own words. My daughter, conquering the world. I was sitting in the basement laundry room of my residence hall. The overhead light buzzed. The heat had been out for 3 days. My fingers were cracked from dish soap and cold water. Same parents, same blood, different worlds. Then, a lifeline. Dr. Whitfield called me into his office. Not to warn me, to hand me a letter. I'd been selected for a competitive summer research fellowship, fully funded. Housing, stipend, meals, everything covered for 10 weeks. You earned this, he said, not because of your situation, because of your work. That summer program saved my academic career. But more importantly, it introduced me to a network of people in healthcare technology, people who saw what I could build, not what I came from. One of those connections would lead me to a name I wouldn't hear again for years, not until I was standing in the back of a wedding I was never supposed to attend. I graduated summa cum laude on a Sunday in May. The stadium held 4,000 people. None of them were mine. Lena stood in the bleachers with a handmade sign that said Dr. Connolly, eventually, in crooked purple letters. She screamed my name when I crossed the stage. One person, louder than a whole family would have been. We took a photo outside, just the 2 of us, caps tilted, grinning into Lena's phone. No parents in the background, no bouquet, no dinner reservation afterward. Lena drove us to a diner on Route 9, and we split a plate of cheese fries and called it a celebration. I got a job within a month. Entry-level software analyst at a small health tech firm outside Hartford. 12 employees, cramped office, terrible coffee. But I learned fast, wrote code, fixed systems nobody else wanted to touch, got promoted once, then again. By 24, I was sketching something of my own on napkins and spreadsheets. A platform to manage patient data for small clinics, the ones too small for enterprise software, but too complex for paper records. The idea that had started as 12 pages in Dr. Whitfield's lab had grown teeth. I used my savings and a small SBA loan to get it off the ground. Named it MedBridge Solutions. The first year, I had 2 clients and a folding table for a desk. I incorporated under my married name. Well, almost married. I'd been engaged briefly in my mid-20s to a man named David Alcott. The relationship didn't survive the 80-hour weeks, but by the time we split, all my business filings, my professional reputation, and my conference badges read Paige Alcott. I never changed them back. It felt like mine by then. A name I'd earned in boardrooms, not inherited at a dinner table where I wasn't welcome. Then one evening, my phone rang. A Connecticut area code I hadn't seen in 6 years. "Hey," Julia said. "It's me." "I know. Mom doesn't know I'm calling." "What do you need, Julia?" "A favor. A financial one." "How much?" $8,000. I'll pay you back." "I can't ask Mom and Dad. They can't know about this." "For what?" "It's complicated." "No." "You don't even—" "No." She hung up. 30 minutes later, my phone lit up with an unknown number. I picked up before I could think. "How dare you refuse your sister?" My mother's voice, colder than I remembered. "After everything this family has done." I pressed the red button, set the phone face down on the counter, and stood there, replaying what Julia had said 30 minutes earlier. "Mom doesn't know I'm calling." So either my mother had suddenly developed telepathy, or my sister had lied to me within the first 5 seconds of our first conversation in 6 years. Some things never change. Made myself a cup of tea, and went back to work. I didn't know what the $8,000 was for, not then. But when I found out, years later in the worst possible way, it explained everything Julia had been hiding. Donna didn't take rejection quietly. She never did. Within a week, my phone started ringing. Numbers I hadn't seen in years. Cousins, family friends, people I barely remembered from childhood holiday dinners. All with the same script. "Paige, your mother is devastated." "Paige, how could you turn your back on Julia?" She'd called every one of them. Built a fresh narrative from scratch. Paige has money now. Paige refused to help her own sister. Paige has become cold and selfish since she left. Aunt Helen called. "Your mother is crying every night because of you." "Did she cry when I was working 3 jobs at 18? That was your choice." "Exactly. And this is also my choice. Goodbye, Aunt Helen." Then came the Facebook post. Long, performative, dripping with carefully constructed sorrow. Some children forget where they come from. A mother's heart can only break so many times. She didn't name me. She didn't have to. 142 likes. Julia's comment sat right at the top. "Love you, Mom. I'm here for you. Always." A perfect duet. The devoted daughter and the wounded mother, staged for an audience that only ever heard one side. I saw the post. I didn't react. Didn't comment. I blocked both accounts, closed my laptop, and went back to debugging a client integration that was due in the morning. A few days later, Lena called me on her break from the hospital. She was halfway through her residency by then. "Hey, random question. Julia's LinkedIn says she's a senior healthcare administrator, but I looked her up on the state licensing registry last night. Nothing. No license. No record. Maybe she hasn't updated it? Or maybe there's nothing to update." I filed that away. I didn't think about it again. I was too busy building something real to chase someone else's lie. I could have fought back. Could have posted my own version, corrected the record, aired the receipts. But I had a company to build. And the best response to a false narrative isn't a counter-narrative. It's a life they can't edit. 26. 2 years after that phone call, MedBridge Solutions closed its Series A round. $4.2 million in funding, 28 employees, a real office in downtown Boston with actual desks and coffee that didn't taste like engine cleaner. I still drove a Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper, still lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Somerville. "I didn't build this company to impress anyone," I told Lena when she asked why I hadn't upgraded. "I built it because I had no safety net and no other option." That October, I was invited to speak at a healthcare technology conference in Chicago. 200 attendees, mostly hospital administrators and clinic operators. I presented MedBridge's platform, how it cut onboarding time for small practices by 60%, how it integrated with existing EHR systems without the enterprise price tag. Afterward, a man in a gray blazer introduced himself near the coffee station. Tall, confident handshake, direct eye contact. Marcus Webb. I'm CFO of Lakeview Medical Partners, a regional clinic chain. We're expanding. What you showed up there is exactly what we've been looking for. How many locations? I asked. 14, 22 by next year. That's a significant rollout. It is, which is why I want to talk numbers. Can we meet next month? We exchanged business cards. I wrote Marcus Webb, Lakeview Medical, follow-up November, in my meeting notes that night. Just a name. Just a potential deal. As I waited for my flight home at O'Hare, a notification popped on my phone. Julia Connolly has sent you a friend request on Facebook. She'd made a new account. The old one was still blocked. I stared at it for a few seconds, then tapped decline, and put my phone away. Marcus Webb. I didn't know he was about to become my sister's fiancé, or that our deal would detonate a lie my family had been building for 9 years. 6 months later, the deal with Lakeview Medical Partners was taking shape. Contract value, $2.8 million, easily the largest in MedBridge's history. My team had spent weeks on the proposal. Technical specs, implementation timelines, compliance documentation. Healthcare is heavily regulated, and every detail had to be airtight. As part of the deal, Lakeview wanted MedBridge to handle their credentialing module, the system that tracks staff licenses, certifications, and continuing education for regulatory audits. To build it properly, we needed their existing personnel records as sample data for implementation. My compliance officer requested the full staff roster with credentials listed. It was a technical requirement, not an investigation. Just data we needed to configure the system correctly. That part was routine. What wasn't routine was the envelope that arrived at my apartment on a Tuesday afternoon, cream-colored, heavy cardstock, gold embossing along the edges. I opened it standing at the kitchen counter, still holding my keys. Together with their families, Julia Connolly and Marcus Webb request the honor of your presence at their wedding. Rosewood Estate, Old Saybrook, Connecticut. Saturday, June 15th. 5 o'clock in the evening. I read it twice. Then I set it down and walked to the window and stood there for a while. Marcus Webb. The same Marcus Webb whose contract was sitting in my inbox. My sister was marrying my biggest client. I picked up the invitation again. A folded piece of notebook paper fell out from behind the RSVP card. The handwriting was shaky, slanted, small letters pressed hard into the paper. Please come. Dad. Not Donna, not Julia. Richard. He'd slipped it in like contraband. My father didn't know what I did for a living. He'd never asked, and I'd never told him. Our only communication in 9 years had been a 7-word email he never followed up on. He didn't send the invitation because he knew about Marcus or MedBridge. He sent it because, for all his failures, he still wanted both his daughters in the same room. I called Lena that night. My sister is marrying my biggest client. Silence. Does he know who you are? She asked. He knows me as the CEO of MedBridge, not as Julia's sister. Does Julia know? I don't think so. She has no idea what I do. So what are you going to do? I looked at the notebook paper. My father's handwriting. Shaky, small. The letters of a man who didn't have the courage to call, but couldn't stop himself from reaching. I'm going to go. I should have thrown the invitation away. Every rational part of me said, don't go. But my father's handwriting, on torn notebook paper, tucked behind an RSVP card like he was afraid someone would see, broke something in me I thought I'd sealed shut. I spent 2 weeks going back and forth. Lena said, if you go, go for yourself, not for them. She was right. She usually was. I decided to attend for 3 reasons. Closure, my father's note, and the fact that I needed one more face-to-face with Marcus before we finalized the contract. A wedding wasn't ideal. But nothing about this situation was ideal. I RSVP'd for 2, myself and Lena, who insisted on coming. You're not walking into that house alone, she said. I didn't survive 4 years of med school to let you face Donna Connolly without backup. Meanwhile, the due diligence process churned along on schedule. My implementation team began running the credentialing data through our verification engine. It's a core feature of the platform, cross-referencing submitted credentials against state licensing databases and university registries. It's what the software does. It's literally the product we were selling them. The kind of paperwork that sits in someone's inbox for a week before anyone notices. The spreadsheet came back with 14 names. I scrolled through it at my desk, coffee in hand, not expecting anything unusual. Line 9. Julia Connolly, Healthcare Administrator, MS in Health Informatics, State University of New York. My stomach dropped. Not surprise exactly. Something closer to confirmation. I thought of what Lena had told me a couple of years back. Her name wasn't on the state registry. I could have flagged it. Could have said something to Marcus right then. But this was a compliance process, not a personal investigation. The protocol was clear. Verify every name on the list. No exceptions, no shortcuts, no favoritism, in either direction. I emailed my legal team. Fast-track the credential verification, the full list, standard procedure. I didn't single Julia out. I didn't have to. The process would find whatever there was to find. 3 days later, a preliminary note came back from our compliance officer. 3 names flagged for extended verification. Institutional responses may take 2 to 4 weeks. The wedding was in 18 days. The results might not arrive until after it. And I realized I wasn't just going to my sister's wedding. I was walking into a collision between 2 worlds she never expected to meet. I didn't ask which 3. I didn't need to. The wedding was in 18 days. The verification results would arrive in 14. And I realized I wasn't just going to my sister's wedding. I was walking into a collision between 2 worlds she never expected to meet. Rosewood Estate sat on 12 acres of rolling vineyard just north of the Connecticut shoreline. String lights hung in loops between old oak trees. White linen draped every surface. A string quartet played something soft and tasteful near the garden entrance. 200 chairs faced a flower-covered arch. It looked like a magazine spread. It looked like money. My parents' money. Lena and I arrived at 4:40. I wore a simple navy dress, hair down, no jewelry worth noticing. Lena wore black. Moral support and funeral energy, she whispered. Both apply. We'd barely made it past the welcome table when a voice cut through the ambient music. I didn't expect to see you here. Aunt Helen. Champagne in hand. Same pinched expression she'd worn the last time she told me I was the difficult one. I was invited, I said. By whom? Does it matter? I'm here. She opened her mouth, closed it, then retreated toward a cluster of cousins near the bar. I watched her whisper something to 2 women I vaguely recognized. Both turned to look at me. Then my mother appeared. Donna Connolly moved through the crowd like a hostess at a gala. Champagne-colored dress, hair blown out, smile set to maximum wattage. She touched shoulders, kissed cheeks, laughed at things that weren't funny. When she saw me, the smile didn't drop. It froze. She crossed the lawn in 6 seconds and pulled me behind a trellis of white roses. What are you doing here? Attending my sister's wedding. You haven't been part of this family for 9 years. Whose choice was that? Her jaw tightened. Don't make a scene, not today. I have no intention of making a scene, Mom. She studied me for 3 long seconds, reading me, calculating. Then she turned back to her guests, voice bright and warm as sunlight. Paige decided to surprise us. How wonderful. She didn't touch me, didn't hug me, just folded me into her performance like a loose thread she needed to tuck away before anyone noticed. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned. My father stood behind me. His suit was a little too big. His eyes were red. He didn't say a word. He just pulled me into his arms and held on. 9 years. The first real embrace in 9 years. I went rigid for a moment. My body didn't remember how to receive this. Then I exhaled and patted his back. Hi, Dad. He nodded into my shoulder, squeezed tighter. I felt Donna's eyes on my back the entire time my father held me. She wasn't angry that I came. She was afraid. I just didn't understand why. Not yet. Julia found me 10 minutes later. She came through the crowd in a cloud of white tulle and hairspray, her face cycling through emotions faster than she could settle on one. Shock, then calculation, then performance. She landed on performance. Paige! Oh my God, you came! She threw her arms around me in front of a dozen watching guests, her voice pitched high enough to carry. I've missed you so much. Her perfume was expensive. Her hug was hollow. She squeezed me like a prop, tight enough for the photos, loose enough to mean nothing. You look great, she said, stepping back, scanning me head to toe. Not warmth, assessment. Congratulations, Julia. Thank you. I can't believe you're here. Mom didn't tell me. She didn't know. A flicker of something crossed Julia's face. She recovered fast. My mother materialized at my elbow. Let's get you seated, Paige. Her hand closed around my arm, not gently, and steered me toward the back of the reception area. The table was tucked behind a pillar near the catering entrance. Place cards for names I didn't recognize. People from Julia's office, plus ones without partners. The farthest seat from the head table. The farthest seat from the microphone. We didn't expect you, Donna said. So this was the only spot left. Lena sat down next to me and said nothing. She didn't need to. Her expression said everything. From the head table, my mother's voice carried across the reception as she introduced Julia to well-wishers. My daughter, the healthcare executive, she's done so well. We're so proud. My daughter, singular. A cousin leaned over to Donna. And Paige, what does she do these days? Oh, she's... A pause, a tilt of the head. Finding herself. You know how it is. Light laughter rippled across the table. A few people glanced in my direction. Lena's hand found mine under the tablecloth. Breathe. I am breathing. I've been breathing through worse than this for 9 years. At the bar, Marcus stood with a group of groomsmen, gesturing animatedly. I heard him say, loud enough to carry, "Wait till you meet our strategic tech partner later. She's flying in just for this." Major deal. He was talking about me. He just didn't know it yet. The speeches began after the main course. Marcus's best man went first, charming, forgettable. Then Julia's maid of honor, a sorority sister who cried on cue. Polite applause, glasses raised, the rhythm of a wedding doing what weddings do. Then my mother stood up. Donna Connolly took the microphone like she'd been born holding one. She smiled at the crowd, dabbed her eyes before she'd even said a word. The performance was immaculate. I want to talk about raising a daughter, she began. My fingers tightened around my water glass. She talked about sacrifice, about late nights and early mornings, about pouring everything into Julia's future. She talked about Julia's incredible academic career, her dedication, her independence. I raised my daughter to be independent, Donna said, to chase her dreams, to never settle. Today she's marrying a man worthy of everything she's built. Independent. The word hit me like a slap, the same word she'd used to deny me everything. She continued, Julia is proof that when a family invests in their children, beautiful things happen. 200 people applauded. I didn't move. Lena's hand pressed harder against mine. Then Donna's gaze drifted across the room and landed on me. A pause, practiced, deliberate. And of course, we love all our children. She said it the way you'd add a footnote, an afterthought stapled to the bottom of a finished page. A few heads turned toward me. I kept my face still. Donna wrapped up with a grand sweep. Why does it feel like something's missing today? Oh, I think it's because our family is finally complete again. Applause. My mother returned to her seat, glowing. My father appeared at my table moments later. His hand found my shoulder. She didn't mean it like that. She meant exactly that, Dad. She always does. He opened his mouth. Nothing came. He patted my shoulder once and walked back to the head table. I wasn't going to say anything. I wasn't going to cause a scene. I was going to sit at my back of the room table, finish my water, and leave. That was the plan. That was always the plan. But then Marcus walked toward my table with a man I recognized, and the plan stopped mattering. Greg Harmon saw me first. He was Marcus's business partner. I'd met him once on a video call during contract negotiations. Stocky, red-faced, a voice that carried. He stopped mid-stride 3 feet from my table. Paige? Paige Connolly? Medbridge? Marcus turned, looked at me, then looked again. Wait. His face rearranged itself in real time. You're Paige Connolly? The Paige Connolly? I stood. Hi, Marcus. But Alcott? That's not... He looked at the invitation in his memory. Connolly. Wait, your real name is Connolly? Paige Connolly, Julia's older sister. I go by Alcott professionally, have for years. The air between us changed. I watched Marcus do the math. The last name, the invitation, the sister Julia had mentioned only in passing, always vaguely, always dismissively. She never, he trailed off. She never mentioned she had a sister in tech. She said her sister was, he stopped himself, but not fast enough. Was what? I asked. His eyes dropped. She said you were estranged, that you had problems. I see. People at nearby tables were turning. A conversation at this volume with the groom at a wedding? It drew eyes the way a raised voice in a library does. My mother appeared in seconds. She moved through the crowd with the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime controlling rooms. Marcus, darling, don't bother Paige. Her voice was warm, her eyes were not. She's here to enjoy, not to talk business. Marcus looked at Donna, the way you look at someone who just told you the sky is green. Business? Mrs. Connolly, do you know who this is? He gestured toward me. This is the CEO of Medbridge Solutions. We're about to sign a $2.8 million contract with her company. Donna's face did something I'd never seen before. For 1 second, maybe less, the mask slipped. Her mouth opened. Her eyes went wide. Something behind them recalculated. Then the smile returned, thinner, tighter. Well, isn't that lovely? Across the reception, Julia was watching. She'd been mid-conversation with a bridesmaid, but her body had turned toward us, her glass frozen halfway to her lips. She set it down on the nearest table and started walking over. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in my sister's eyes. Not of me, of being found out. Marcus didn't wait for Julia to reach us. He was already moving toward the stage, microphone in hand, running on the adrenaline of a man who'd just stumbled into what he thought was the greatest coincidence of the evening. Everyone, sorry, one more quick announcement. He grinned at the crowd. 200 faces turned. I just found out something incredible. The CEO of Medbridge Solutions, the company that's about to transform our clinic operations, is here tonight, and she happens to be Julia's older sister. The string quartet had stopped. Even the catering staff paused. Paige Alcott, or, as I just found out, Paige Connolly, Julia's older sister. Marcus pointed toward my table. Built her company from the ground up. No family connections, no investors initially. She coded the first prototype herself while working 2 jobs, Forbes 30 Under 30 finalist, and she's been sitting at the back table this whole time. Silence first, then applause, scattered at the start, then louder, then sustained. People craned their necks, a few stood. I stayed on my feet, nodded once. Thank you, Marcus. This is Julia's day. Let's keep the focus on the bride and groom. But 200 people were already doing what 200 people do. They were recalculating. I could see it on their faces. The whispers started immediately. Wait, that's the sister Donna said was finding herself? That's the one who left? Forbes? At the head table, my mother sat motionless. She was still smiling, but the smile had gone rigid. The kind of expression muscles hold when the brain behind them has stopped sending instructions. Julia stood frozen near the dessert table. Her bouquet dangled from one hand. And Aunt Helen, my mother's most loyal messenger, the woman who'd called me difficult twice in a decade, walked up to me with her face flushed pink. Why didn't you tell us? I did, Aunt Helen. I kept my voice level. 6 years ago, you said I was the difficult one. She had no answer for that. She stood there with her mouth half open, then turned and walked away. The status reveal was just the appetizer. The main course was still coming, and it had nothing to do with me. Julia reached Marcus before I did. I couldn't hear the words from where I stood, but I could read the body language. Julia's hands moved fast, explaining, deflecting, reshaping. Marcus's arms were crossed. His jaw was set. He shook his head once, slowly, the way a man does when he's hearing something that doesn't add up. Donna intercepted me on the way to the bar. You planned this, didn't you? Planned what? Being successful? I looked at her. No, Mom, that was your idea, remember? Be independent. You came here to humiliate your sister. I came because Dad asked me to. Everything else, You built yourself. She stepped closer. Her voice dropped to a hiss. You always had to make everything about you. This is the first time in 9 years I've been in the same room as you. I didn't make a speech. I didn't ask for the microphone. Your son-in-law introduced me. Take it up with him. She turned and walked away. I watched her hands. They were trembling. 5 minutes later, Marcus appeared at my side. His phone was in his hand. His face was different now. The warmth from the announcement gone, replaced by something flat and controlled. Paige, can we talk? Not here. We stepped onto the balcony overlooking the vineyard. The sun was setting. The light was beautiful. It felt obscene given what was coming. My team sent me the due diligence report this morning, he said. I hadn't read it until just now. He held up his phone. Julia's name is on the credential verification list. I know. It says her master's degree from State University doesn't exist. They have no record of her completing any program. She enrolled but didn't finish sophomore year. I know. He stared at me. You knew? And you didn't tell me? The final verification came back yesterday morning. Saturday delivery to my compliance officer's email. She forwarded it to me 3 hours before I got in the car to drive here. I haven't had time to process it through legal yet, Marcus. I didn't even know how to begin that conversation. Hi, your fiancé's credentials don't check out. Also, she's my estranged sister. There's no playbook for this. His phone screen went dark. He stood there, both hands on the railing, staring at the vineyard rows below. 3 minutes of silence. The bass from the reception music thumped faintly through the glass doors. Then he said something I'll never forget. I'm going to ask her once, Marcus said, still gripping the railing. In front of everyone, because if she lies to my face one more time, in front of my family, my partners, then I'll know exactly who I almost married. Marcus, don't. I need to do this. He walked back inside. I followed 3 steps behind. I didn't want to be part of whatever was about to happen, but I couldn't look away either. Julia was standing near the cake table, talking to a bridesmaid with a smile that was working too hard. She saw Marcus coming and her smile brightened. Baby, whatever she told you, did you graduate from State? The bridesmaid took a step back. What? Julia laughed, a short, nervous sound. Of course I don't. Did you? Julia's eyes moved, left, right. She was scanning the room, calculating who could hear. Most of the tables within earshot had gone quiet. Can we talk about this later? You told me you had a master's. Marcus's voice wasn't loud. It was rigid, the kind of quiet that makes people lean in. You told your parents you graduated. You told my clinic you were certified. Donna materialized at Julia's side. Her hand found Julia's arm. Marcus, lower your voice. Did you know? He turned to Donna. Know what? My daughter graduated with honors. She didn't graduate at all, Mrs. Connolly. Marcus's voice cracked on the last word. She dropped out sophomore year. 200 guests. Total silence. Even the string quartet had stopped. The only sound was a wine glass someone set down too hard at table 6. Julia's face crumpled. The performance fell away all at once, like scaffolding collapsing off a building. Tears streaked her makeup. I was going to tell you. When? After the wedding? Marcus's jaw trembled. After I hired you into my company based on a resume you made up? Donna opened her mouth again, and Marcus spun toward her. Stop! Marcus held up one hand. Not loud, not a shout, but the single word landed like a door closing. Julia's mouth froze mid-sentence. The entire reception went still. He turned and looked at me, standing 10 feet away, silent, holding nothing, doing nothing. This person, his voice cracked. He pressed his fist to his mouth for a moment, steadied himself, then dropped his hand. This person is the only honest Connolly in this room. 200 people looked at me. I didn't speak. I didn't nod. I didn't need to. At the edge of the stage, my father stood alone. One hand gripped the back of a chair. He wasn't defending anyone. He wasn't speaking. He was crying, silently, the way men cry when they've known for years and said nothing. Marcus walked off the patio and didn't look back. Greg followed him. A cluster of groomsmen trailed after, exchanging glances that said what no one would say out loud. This wedding was over. Julia sank to the ground. Her dress pooled around her like a deflated parachute, all that white fabric, all that money, settling on the flagstone. Two bridesmaids crouched beside her. One handed her a napkin. Julia didn't take it. The reception hummed with the low, electric murmur of 200 people processing something they'd never forget. Chairs scraped, phones came out. Someone at a back table was already texting. My mother turned to me. Her composure was gone, not cracked, shattered. Her voice came out raw. Are you happy now? You destroyed your sister's life. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't step closer. I spoke clearly enough for the tables nearby to hear. Not because I wanted an audience, but because I was done having conversations in corners. No, Mom. Julia's lies destroyed Julia's life. My company's standard compliance process found the truth. That's not revenge. That's accountability. You could have buried it, her voice shook. You could have said nothing. And committed fraud? Risked my company, my employees, my clients for a lie? I shook my head. No, I won't sacrifice my integrity for this family's image. Not anymore. Something shifted in the crowd. I could feel it, the weight of perception tilting. A few relatives at nearby tables exchanged looks. Aunt Helen pressed her hand to her mouth. An older man I didn't recognize, someone from Marcus's side, nodded at me once. Just once. But it meant everything. Donna looked around. For the first time, the room wasn't with her. She turned and walked toward the parking lot without another word. A hand touched my arm. I turned. Megan, Julia's maid of honor, stood there, eyes red. I should have said something years ago, she said. I knew about the degree. She begged me to keep quiet. I'm sorry. So the lie had roots, deeper and wider than I'd imagined. I picked up my clutch from the table. It was time to go. I was halfway across the gravel parking lot when I heard his footsteps, uneven, hurried, dress shoes on loose stone. Paige, wait. I stopped but didn't turn around. The evening air was warm and still. Crickets had started up in the vineyard rows. I have nothing left to say, Dad. Then let me say something. His voice was winded. For once. I turned. My father stood under a string of lights that ended at the edge of the lot. His tie was loose. His eyes were swollen. He looked 10 years older than the man I'd left in the garage that morning 9 years ago. I knew it was wrong, he said. Every single day, Paige. I knew what your mother was doing was wrong, and I said nothing. Why? He pressed his lips together, looked at the ground, looked back at me. Because I was a coward. Because it was easier to lose you quietly than to fight her loudly. His voice cracked. And that makes me worse than her. Because she at least believed she was right. I knew she was wrong, and I still chose peace. The word hung between us. Peace, the same word he'd been hiding behind my whole life. That wasn't peace, Dad. That was abandonment. I know. Silence. A car started somewhere in the lot. The muffled bass of the reception music still pulsed from inside. Somewhere behind us, Julia was still sitting on the ground in her wedding dress. Somewhere my mother was finding her car keys. And here, under a string of lights on a gravel lot, my father was doing the only honest thing he'd done in a decade. I don't hate you, I said, but I can't forgive you tonight. Maybe not for a long time. That's fair. I need to go. He nodded. Drive safe. 2 words. Simple, small. But they weren't an excuse this time. They weren't a deflection. For the first time in 9 years, my father said something to me that wasn't designed to end a conversation. It was an admission that he had no right to extend one. Lena was waiting by the car. She didn't ask what he said. She just started the engine. I didn't cry until we hit the highway. The fallout came in waves. The first wave was digital. Within 48 hours, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. But for the first time in nearly a decade, the calls weren't accusations. They were apologies. Aunt Helen called on Monday morning. Her voice was different, lower, stripped of the righteous certainty I'd grown up hearing. Paige, I owe you an apology. I believed everything your mother told me. For 9 years. Every word. I was wrong. I thanked her. I didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't. My great-aunt Margaret, My grandmother's sister, the oldest living member of the family, sent me an email that night. 3 lines. Your grandmother would have been so proud of you. I'm sorry we weren't there. Please don't give up on all of us. The second wave was professional. Marcus's colleagues at Lakeview began verifying Julia's employment history. What they found matched what I already suspected. Julia had never held the title of healthcare administrator. She was a receptionist. A good one by most accounts. Personable, organized, well-liked. But the title on her LinkedIn, the credentials on her resume, the degree on the wall of her home office, none of it was real. Marcus emailed me Tuesday evening. Professional, controlled. The contract with Medbridge remains on track. Julia's situation is personal, and I won't let it affect our professional relationship. But I need some time before our next meeting. I hope you understand. I understood. The third wave was social media. Donna posted once, a long, tearful paragraph. My family is being torn apart by jealousy and lies. Pray for us. It was the same playbook she'd run for years, but this time the comment section didn't cooperate. What about Paige? What really happened at the wedding? Is it true about Julia's degree? She deleted the post within 4 hours. Then, on Wednesday night, a text from Julia. No preamble, no performance. I'm sorry, for all of it. I don't expect you to believe me. I read it 3 times. I didn't respond, not because I didn't believe her, because I didn't know what to say yet. Some messages need to sit before you know what they deserve. 2 weeks later, the consequences had stopped being whispers and started becoming facts. Julia was terminated from Lakeview Medical Partners. The HR department's review confirmed what Marcus already knew. She'd misrepresented her credentials on her employment application. A fabricated degree. A professional title she never held. Under Connecticut's at-will employment laws, that alone was sufficient cause. But it was worse than a simple firing. Because Julia had listed those fake credentials on paperwork submitted during a federal compliance audit the previous year, the clinic's legal team flagged it as a potential liability. She wasn't criminally charged, there was no patient harm, no billing fraud, but the termination was documented as credential misrepresentation. And in healthcare, that's the kind of note that follows you from one job application to the next. Marcus called off the wedding quietly. No dramatic announcement, no public statement. He simply informed family and friends that the engagement was over. The Rosewood estate refunded what it could. The registry gifts were returned. The honeymoon to Portugal was cancelled. I heard this secondhand through Lena, who heard it from a mutual connection at the hospital. Donna's social circle, the one she'd spent 30 years cultivating, began to contract. Old friends stopped calling. Neighbors who used to drop by with casseroles kept their distance. Great-Aunt Margaret told me that at a family gathering the following month, Donna sat in the corner and spoke to almost no one. She looked like a woman who'd run out of script, Margaret said. The Medbridge contract with Lakeview went through on schedule. $2.8 million. My team handled the implementation over the next 6 months. Marcus and I kept things professional, cordial, efficient, separate from everything personal. He sent me flowers on Medbridge's 5th anniversary. The card read, "From one self-made person to another." Then, on a rainy Thursday, a package arrived at my apartment. Small, no return address, Connecticut postmark. Inside was a piece of paper I hadn't seen in 12 years. My honor roll certificate, the one my mother had pulled off the refrigerator when I was 15, the one that had vanished by morning. It was slightly bent at the corners, yellowed along the edges. A post-it note was stuck to the back in my father's shaky handwriting. It was never cluttered. It was always yours. He'd kept it, 12 years, in a desk drawer, hidden from my mother. The way he'd hidden every honest impulse he'd ever had. It wasn't enough. A piece of paper couldn't undo a decade. But I held it for a long time before I put it down. I didn't call anyone for a week. I needed the silence. Then, on a Sunday morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee and did what I should have done years ago. Not out of anger, not out of victory, but out of clarity. I set the terms. I wrote my mother an email. Not a text, not a call, an email. Because Donna performed best in real time, and I wasn't giving her a stage. Mom, I don't hate you, but I won't pretend anymore. You chose Julia not because she needed you more, but because she was easier to control. I was inconvenient because I asked questions. I'm not asking anymore. If you want a relationship with me, it starts with honesty, not a performance, not a Facebook post. Honesty. The ball is in your court. I hit send. I didn't reread it. She never replied. I wasn't surprised. Narcissists don't negotiate. They perform or they retreat. Donna retreated. I called my father the following evening. I'm open to staying in touch, I said, but on my terms. No more give it time. No more hiding behind mom. If you want to be my father out loud. A long pause. I could hear him breathing. I'll try. Don't try. Do. Okay. It wasn't a grand reconciliation. It was a crack in a wall. Enough to let light through. Not enough to walk through. Not yet. As for Julia, I didn't reach out. Not because I hated her. Because I wasn't ready. Forgiveness isn't a door you slam shut. It's a door you open when you're strong enough to stand in the frame without flinching. I wasn't there yet. Maybe someday. But not on anyone else's timeline. That Friday night, Lena came over with Thai food and a bottle of wine. We sat on my living room floor, containers spread between us, and she raised her glass. To the family you chose. I smiled. For the first time in this whole story, a real one. To the family I chose. There's a question people ask me, not often. But when they hear pieces of my story, at a conference or over dinner, or in one of those late-night conversations that go deeper than you planned, they ask, do you feel vindicated? I'm sitting in my office right now. It's early, 6:30, before anyone else gets in. The Boston skyline is turning orange through the window. 28 desks out there, 28 people who'll walk in within the hour, each of them building something that matters. This company started as 12 pages in a professor's lab and a girl who couldn't afford her own dorm sheets. And no, I don't feel vindicated. Vindication implies I needed them to be wrong for me to be right. I didn't. I just needed to be free. For years, I measured myself by a scale my mother built, a scale designed so that I would always come up short and Julia would always shine. It took me a long time to realize the scale itself was broken. Not me. I started therapy 3 years ago. Twice a month, Wednesday evenings, with a woman named Dr. Russo, who has a way of asking questions that make you sit in silence for a full minute before you can answer. I used to think therapy was a sign of weakness, something you needed only if you couldn't handle your own problems. Turns out, it's the opposite. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than building MedBridge, harder than sleeping 3 hours a night, harder than walking into that wedding. My mother's voice still plays in my head sometimes. Resilience is a gift, Paige. She said it to justify leaving me with nothing. She meant it as a weapon. But she was right about one thing. Resilience is a gift. She just didn't give it to me. I forged it myself, in late-night kitchens and early-morning classrooms and a dorm room with a broken window, and nobody, not her, not anyone, gets to take credit for that. Here's where everyone is now. My mother still lives in the house on Maple Ridge Lane. She posts on Facebook less frequently, once or twice a month, where it used to be daily. The posts are shorter, no more long paragraphs about sacrifice and motherhood, mostly photos of her garden. Aunt Helen told me Donna joined a book club but quit after 2 meetings because the women asked too many personal questions. She hasn't reached out to me. I don't expect her to. Some people would rather lose a daughter than admit they were wrong. I've made peace with that, not because it doesn't hurt, but because waiting for her to change was hurting more. My father calls me every Sunday, 5:30 in the evening like clockwork. The calls last 5 to 10 minutes. He tells me about the weather, about the neighbor's dog, about a documentary he watched. He never mentions my mother. I never ask. It's not enough, but it's something. And after 9 years of nothing, something feels like a lot. He's trying. I see that. I'm not sure trying is enough, but he's doing it out loud, and that's the part that matters. Julia enrolled at a community college in New Haven, a real program this time, with real transcripts and real coursework. She and Marcus are no longer together. She sent me a handwritten letter, 4 pages front and back, about 3 months after the wedding. I read it at my kitchen table. It was honest in a way Julia had never been honest with me before. She didn't blame my mother. She didn't blame me. She wrote, I spent so long being who they wanted me to be that I forgot to become anyone real. I haven't written back yet. Some letters need time to sit before you know what to say in return. But I haven't thrown it away either. It's in my desk drawer, right next to the honor roll certificate. Marcus and I closed the Lakeview contract successfully. We keep things professional, clean, respectful, boundaried. He's a good man who got caught in someone else's wreckage. I respect how he handled it. And me, MedBridge is growing. We're hiring. The platform is live in over 30 clinics across New England, Lakeview, plus a dozen other partners. But that's not the update that matters. The update that matters is this. I sleep through the night now. I don't flinch when a Connecticut area code lights up my phone. I have people around me who chose me, not because we share blood, but because we share respect. That's enough. That's more than enough. If you're watching this and you recognize your family and mine, I see you. I was you. You don't have to blow up a wedding to find your freedom. Sometimes it's quieter than that. Sometimes it's blocking a number at 2 a.m. Sometimes it's walking into a therapist's office for the first time and saying the sentence you've been holding for years. Sometimes it's just the word no. Said once, said clearly, and not taken back. My parents taught me one thing, even though they didn't mean to. They taught me I could survive without them. And once you know that, really know it, in your bones, in your worst moments, in the silence of an empty dorm room at 18, nobody has power over you anymore. I don't tell this story for pity. I have a company, a best friend who held my hand under a tablecloth at the worst dinner party in Connecticut history, and a life I built with my own 2 burned, cracked, dishwater-wrinkled hands. I don't need pity. I tell this story because for 9 years, my mother controlled the narrative. Paige left because she was difficult. Paige refused our help. Paige is the problem. 200 people believed her. My aunt believed her. My cousins believed her. And there were nights, long, cold, 3 a.m. nights, when I almost believed her too. Today, I'm taking my story back. If you're the scapegoat in your family, Kai, the one who's too much or not enough, if you're the name that gets whispered at Thanksgiving, the child whose certificate got pulled off the refrigerator, hear me when I say this. Their rejection is not your reflection. I'm Paige Connolly. I'm 27. I run a company I built from nothing. I have a family that chose me, and I sleep well at night. That's enough. If Paige's story reminded you of your own, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Were you the golden child, or the one who got left behind? And if this resonated with someone you know, share it with them. Sometimes the story you needed to hear is the one someone else needed to send you. Check the description for more stories like this one. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself.